is potentially dumber than hell. It was announced the WNBA Players Union had voted to authorize a strike.
The Women's National Basketball Association is currently navigating the most significant inflection point in its three-decade history. While the league has experienced a commercial renaissance characterized by record-breaking viewership, attendance, and sponsorship revenue, this growth has simultaneously triggered a profound labor management confrontation that threatens the league's operational continuity.
The NBA is going to draw the line, and they will draw the line to the point of shutting the WNBA's doors down.
The convergence of a near-unanimous strike authorization, the emergence of well-funded competitive leagues, and a fundamental dispute over revenue transparency has created a scenario where the 2026 season and potentially the league's long-term survival is at risk.
They are not going to give the revenue sharing that the WNBA players want. They did this to publicly save face.
The current crisis originated in late 2024 when the Players Association exercised its right to opt out of the existing collective bargaining agreement. This decision set a deadline for October 31, 2025, which has since been subjected to multiple extensions as negotiations reached a stalemate. The most recent extension established January 9, 2026 as the final deadline for a new agreement, just weeks before the traditional start of the free agency period.
The new max contract would be like a hair under $2 million. The max contract now is $250,000.
On December 18, 2025, the union announced that its membership had overwhelmingly authorized the executive committee to call a strike if negotiations do not yield a satisfactory agreement. The scale of this vote represents an unprecedented level of player solidarity. With 93% of all eligible players participating in the vote, 98% voted in favor of strike authorization.
That's a great way for these players to lose the support of fans, because the biggest complaint all these years is they didn't get paid enough money.
While the union clarified that the vote is not an immediate call for a work stoppage, it serves as a powerful negotiating tool, signaling that the players are prepared to halt the 2026 season to secure structural changes to their compensation. The legal framework of the current extension is particularly volatile. Under the terms of the agreement reached in late 2025, both the league and the union possess the right to terminate the extension with only 48 hours' notice. This narrow window means that the league could move from active negotiations to a full work stoppage in less than 2 days, potentially disrupting the expansion draft for new teams in Toronto and Portland, as well as the 2026 draft. The labor dispute is occurring against a backdrop of unprecedented financial growth. In 2024, the league saw its viewership increase by triple digits for many marquee matchups, driven largely by the arrival of high-profile rookies and a general surge in women's sports interest. The league's revenue reached approximately $200 million in 2023, double the $102 million reported in 2019, with 2025 projections suggesting a move toward a $1 billion global industry. The central point of contention in negotiations is the percentage of league revenue that is paid to players. Under the current model, players receive approximately 9.3% of the league's total revenue. In contrast, other major professional sports leagues have collectively bargained for revenue-sharing models that provide players with roughly 48 to 51% of total sport-related income. Union leadership has proposed a model that would grant players roughly 30% of total league and team revenue. The league has countered with a proposal that pays players less than 15% of revenue, arguing that the current stage of development requires a higher percentage of revenue to be reinvested into infrastructure, marketing, and the repayment of long-term debt. A significant layer of the dispute involves the transparency of the league's financial records. For decades, the league has maintained a narrative of unprofitability, with recent reports suggesting it is on track to lose $50 million in 2025. However, the union and several financial analysts have questioned these figures, suggesting that complex accounting is used to obscure profits. Critics point to the fact that the league is approximately 42% owned by the men's league and 42% by its 12 individual teams, with the remaining 16% held by outside investors. But the reported losses often include the cost of servicing debt and high central office expenses. Furthermore, the share of the massive $2.2 billion media rights deal has been described as a misdirection, with some arguing that the Women's League is being undervalued to bolster broader business objectives. The connection between the commissioner and her former employer, a major auditing firm, has also become a flashpoint. This firm serves as the league's auditor, leading to allegations of a conflict of interest that allows the league to maintain its poverty narrative while franchise valuations soar from $10 million to over $400 million in just 5 years. In late 2025, the league leaked details of a proposal that would significantly increase player salaries, including a headline-grabbing max salary of over $1.1 million. While the league characterized this as a highly lucrative package designed to bring negotiations to a quick conclusion, the union has publicly criticized the offer as misleading. Analysis of the proposal reveals that the $1.1 million figure is not a guaranteed base salary. Instead, it represents a combination of a six-figure base salary, likely between $800,000 and $850,000, and potential revenue-sharing bonuses that would only be triggered if the league hits specific, aggressive financial targets. Players have expressed skepticism regarding these targets, noting that similar revenue-sharing clauses in the past were never met. While the triples and quadruples in salary percentages look impressive on paper, the union argues that they still do not reflect the players' true market value in a league projected to hit $1 billion in revenue. Furthermore, the league's latest proposal included provisions that the union finds unacceptable, such as the elimination of team-provided housing benefits and a move to an earlier training camp start date in mid-March. For players who rely on overseas income or domestic off-season leagues, the earlier start date would effectively force them to choose between the domestic league and more lucrative international contracts, a restriction they refer to as exclusivity without paying for it. For the first time in its existence, the league is facing credible domestic and international competition for its talent. This has shifted the leverage in labor negotiations, as players are no longer dependent on a single American platform for professional play. The 3-on-3 league founded by superstars has emerged as a major disruptive force. Running from January to March, it offers higher average salaries than the primary league for a shorter season, alongside top-tier training facilities and, crucially, equity stakes for its players. The existence of this alternative league has created a complex dynamic within the union. Some analysts suggest a conflict of interest, as the founders serve in union leadership while building a competitor league that would benefit from a work stoppage. If the 2026 season were canceled, this alternative would likely absorb much of the media attention and sponsorship interest. However, the founders maintain that their league is a complementary off-season alternative intended to keep players stateside and grow their brands. The most significant financial threat comes from a new global 5-on-5 league set to launch in late 2026. This project has reportedly offered multi-year contracts worth between $2 million and $8 million annually, dwarfing even the most transformational proposals from the primary league. This league is partnered with international entertainment firms backed by significant foreign investment funds. This connection has led to complex discussions regarding the source of the funding, mirroring shifts seen in professional golf. Several high-profile players have already signed with this global tour as both players and partners, placing immense pressure on the commissioner. If the league cannot match the financial security offered by these global entities, it faces the real risk of a talent drain, where the most marketable stars depart for a global tour. The 2024 and 2025 seasons were defined by the unprecedented cultural impact of generational rookies. Their arrival led to sellout crowds in every city and the highest television ratings in history. However, this golden goose moment is being jeopardized by the labor dispute. Data from social media platforms indicates a growing frustration among new fans who fear that a strike will destroy the momentum recently built. Some fans have expressed a sentiment that if the league and players cannot capitalize on this historic interest, the growth may stall permanently. Stars have adopted a pragmatic stance, urging compromise. They note that the fans crave the game, while acknowledging that players must fight for what they deserve. The risk for the union is that a prolonged strike could alienate casual viewers who are not yet emotionally invested in the long-term struggle for labor equity. If the 2026 season is canceled, there is no guarantee that the millions of new fans will return in 2027. Industry analysts have provided a stark warning regarding the current negotiations. Some posit that if the union believes the governing bodies will easily cave to their demands, they are fundamentally mistaken. The argument is that if players demand a high percentage of revenue before the league has reached actual cash flow positivity, the owners may choose to fold the league rather than continue to subsidize it. From the owner's perspective, the league is an asset that can be liquidated or sold if the cost of labor makes the business model unviable. This perspective highlights a divide between the superstars who have leverage through alternative leagues and the rank-and-file players who have fewer alternative platforms for professional play in the United States. As the January 9 deadline approaches, Both sides find themselves in a high-stakes dilemma. They must decide whether to compromise on a middle ground or risk a total shutdown. A resolution would likely require the league to move away from a fixed-rate salary cap and toward a true revenue-sharing model. Even if the initial percentage is lower than other major leagues, perhaps starting at 20 or 25%, this would provide the transparency and growth potential that the players are demanding. In return, the union may have to accept the elimination of certain legacy benefits or agree to a soft cap that allows teams to spend more on superstars while maintaining a baseline for the rest of the roster. If no deal is reached by January 9, the ripple effects will be severe. The entry of expansion teams in Golden State, Toronto, and Portland would be indefinitely delayed. Player movement would halt, preventing teams from building rosters for the 2026 season. Broadcasters may attempt to trigger legal clauses in media deals if the league fails to provide a certain number of games. High-profile stars would likely sign bridge contracts with global leagues, potentially never returning. The league is no longer a charity project or a secondary asset. It is a burgeoning multi-billion-dollar business. However, it is being managed under a labor framework that dates back to an era of financial desperation. The current strike authorization is not merely about higher salaries, it is a demand for a structural realignment that treats players as partners in success rather than expenses to be minimized. The risk of the league being canceled is real because the exit options for the players are now as robust as the exit options for the owners. To survive this crisis, the league must bridge the gap between its public narrative of commercial triumph and its private narrative of financial struggle. Failure to do so will likely result in the most successful era in the sport's history being cut short by a preventable labor catastrophe. The negotiation gap, the difference between player demands and the league's offer, represents a significant portion of total revenue. This delta represents the cost of peace. Whether the owners view this as an acceptable investment in survival or an unacceptable cost that warrants a shutdown remains the central question of 2026. The 48-hour termination window means the answer will come swiftly. To understand why the players are so resolute, one must analyze the shortcomings of the previous 2020 agreement. At the time, it was hailed as a breakthrough, but the mechanisms of revenue sharing were designed to be almost impossible to trigger. Revenue sharing was only activated if the league increased its revenue by a high percentage over a cumulative target. Because of the pandemic-affected seasons, these benchmarks were missed, and the players essentially forfeited any chance of sharing in the recent revenue booms. This history has led to a deep-seated refusal to accept any incentive-based models that are not tied to gross income. A second major issue was the rigid nature of the salary cap. Even when top salaries were increased, only a handful of players could receive them without exhausting the team's entire budget. This forced teams to fill remaining spots with players on minimum contracts, leading to a missing middle where veteran role players were often waived to save space. The proposal to triple the cap is intended to alleviate this pressure, but the union remains wary that without a growth mechanism tied to income, the cap will once again become a tool for wage suppression as media and sponsorship revenues climb. The emergence of global competition represents a paradigm shift. Unlike previous rival leagues that failed due to lack of capital, new entrants are coming in with immense liquidity. These global offers are not just about salary, they are about establishing a new market floor. By offering equity, these competitors are enticing players with the prospect of long-term wealth. Furthermore, they are targeting the international market, tapping into a global audience in Europe, Asia, and South America. If a competitor successfully signs a large portion of the league's top talent, it could effectively replace the domestic league as the world's premier competition. The labor dispute has also sparked a debate regarding the ethics of taking investment from certain foreign funds. Some players and fans have expressed deep concern over human rights records. However, the union's counter-argument points to the business ties of domestic owners. Players note that they are simply trying to maximize their career earnings. For many veterans, the opportunity to earn millions in one season compared to a fraction of that domestically is an offer they feel they cannot refuse. The timing is particularly damaging for expansion plans. New teams have already begun hiring staff, selling tickets, and investing in facilities. In Toronto, a team marketed as a national icon has joined with high-profile ownership groups to build hype. However, without a finalized agreement, the expansion draft remains in limbo. If the dispute continues, these new franchises may be forced to delay their inaugural seasons, leading to massive financial losses and a cooling of momentum. The Golden State franchise, which has already seen massive season ticket interest, is particularly vulnerable. A lockout would turn a success story into a public relations nightmare. While the strike authorization suggests unity, there are underlying tensions the league may attempt to exploit. The majority of players are not superstars. They are role players and rookies making modest salaries. For these players, a strike is a significant financial risk. They do not have multi-million-dollar endorsement deals. If the season is canceled, they lose their income and their path to a pension. The league's proposal to raise the minimum salary is a carrot intended for this group. The leadership is gambling that as the deadline approaches, the rank and file will pressure the union to accept the offer. In contrast, the union's top leadership is focused on macro issues of revenue sharing and equity. They argue that accepting a high minimum salary now without a tied cap is short-sighted and will leave players underpaid in the long run. This generational perspective is what drove the vote, but the difficult nature of negotiations could lead to a fracture if a work stoppage begins to look permanent. The most chilling possibility is that the owners are not bluffing. For many, the league is still a speculative asset. When owners say they are losing money, they may be referring to losses after high capital expenditures, such as building new facilities or upgrading travel. If the union demands a share of revenue that prevents owners from recouping these investments, they may decide the business is no longer viable. The primary responsibility of governing bodies is to the team owners, many of whom have subsidized the league for decades. If they decide it has become unmanageable, they may choose to dissolve the structure and allow the market to reset. The league is currently engaged in a high-stakes game. The players have the momentum of a new era and the leverage of global alternatives. The owners have the legal right to a lockout and the ultimate option of folding. The January deadline is the point of no return. If a deal is not reached, the termination clause will likely be triggered, and growth will grind to a halt. To avoid this, the league must provide transparency, and the players must provide stability. The future depends on whether the two sides can transition from adversaries to partners in a billion-dollar future. Failure will turn a historic opportunity into a cautionary tale.